hope you all had a wonderful Valentine's Day, and I also hope you remember to celebrate Ferris Wheel Day. That's right. In case you didn't know it, February 14th is also the celebration of the invention of the Ferris wheel. So if you didn't know that, then in 2021, keep that in mind when you're going to celebrate your Valentine's Day festivities. On a more serious note, though, how many of you have ever had to be firm with someone, or someone has had to be firm with you? If you're a parent, okay, yeah. Any other hands want to go up? Yeah, okay. If you're a parent, you probably know exactly what it's like to be firm with someone, because no doubt you've had to be firm with your kids. So if you're a kid, your parents were probably firm with you at some point. And I'm not a parent, but as wonderful as kids are, I know that they need to be dealt with, sometimes very firmly, but fairly. They need to know who's in charge, and then as the parent, that means that sometimes parents or guardians have to say no. Yeah. Now, when I was a kid, I used to ask my parents for something, my mom or my dad, and if they said no, I would have the reaction of, why not? Or I'd ask why, over and over and over, or I'd say, please dad, please mom, can I have this, please, over and over and over again. How many of you have felt that exact same thing or experienced that same thing? Probably a few of us. Now kids, when they do this, they keep asking, kind of hoping that they'll wear you down and eventually you'll say yes and give in. And if it's something trivial, like a piece of chocolate, or whether they can stay up a little later, sometimes you'll give in. And you'll say yes. But if it's something really, really, really important that you know can't happen, you'll stand firm in your decision. Because you know that's the right thing for you as a parent, and it's the right thing for you, for your kids. If you've ever had to bring your kid to the doctors for a needle, or to the dentist, your kid has probably cried or screamed, or if you remember going to the dentist, it was probably something you hated as a kid. But as a parent, or your parents, they knew it was the right thing for you. You needed to get your teeth checked up, you needed to get that needle in order to feel better, because if you didn't, something worse was going to happen. And I'm sure whether you're a parent or not, we've all faced a decision where we've had to be firm. Sure, it may not be the doctor's office or the dentist, but it may be something even more important. Something where you know if you compromise, it would have great consequences for your life and not in a good light. And you had to stand firm. I hope you stood firm, and that's our point for today, is stand firm. This is going to be our last message in our series of Daring Faith, and we've talked about some really good stuff about faith. We've talked about how faith in God involves looking to Jesus, trusting Jesus, obeying God, loving God, and now we come to the importance of standing firm in our faith. So please remember to stand firm. So there were three men that were given the choice whether they could compromise or stand firm in their faith. And they were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And our passage today is Daniel chapter 3, verse 16 to 18. That's Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 to 18. And I'll be reading from the New American Standard Bible version, but also the words will be on the screen as well. So Daniel chapter 3, verse 16 to 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Now this is truly an amazing story, and to grasp its full meaning, you kind of have to go to the beginning of the whole book, but if you're in your Bibles, go to Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. Go right there. We're going to go through this whole chapter together. So follow along in your Bibles if you have them. So the names of the main characters are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Let's keep them in mind. And they had been taken as captives by this king known as King Nebuchadnezzar. He's this king of Babylon, and he had destroyed Jerusalem. And he had taken off people and possessions as plunder. And these three men were part of that plunder. He took these literal people. And this is dated in 605 BC, also a long, long time ago. So there's these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and there's a fourth person named Daniel. You may remember Daniel in the lion's den. He has a man of great faith. So these four guys are taken in, and they're given this special treatment in Babylonian language and literature, and they're offered this royal treatment and this delicious food. However, the Babylonians violated the laws of God in their preparation of the food. because the food was contained with the blood of the slaughtered animals. And this was something that was restricted in the Jewish law, which you can find in Leviticus 17, verse 10. So these four men, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refuse to eat the food. And they actually undergo a test saying, we won't eat the food, give us just vegetables and water. And so they do, and they're actually proven to be more attractive and to be smarter than the other people. And so God blesses them and gives them great knowledge, and Nebuchadnezzar is just so blown away by these four men. And God blesses their faith. And Daniel actually gains this ability to understand visions and dreams. So one day Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and Daniel actually interprets that dream for him, and Nebuchadnezzar's like blown away, like, wow, there must be, like, this God that Daniel serves is amazing. Which brings us to the beginning of chapter 3. So, verse 1, chapter 3. So I'm going to put some little pictures here to help immerse you in the story. So here's King Nebuchadnezzar. Look how wonderful he is. He's got that palm waver dude. He's a really high important guy. So verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and its width 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So the statue King Nebuchadnezzar makes was not made entirely out of gold. It was like a big wooden statue or something, and then it was covered in gold. And it was to show his greatness and his glory. The statue was 90 feet high and 9 feet high. Now, just for reference, I'm about 6 feet high. Okay? So the width of the statue is 1.5 times myself. So that's pretty wide. So the height was 9 feet high, and that's kind of tricky to imagine. So here's a nice visual aid. How many of you know the Hollywood letters? Okay, those big old signs. Okay, each one of those letters, about 2 of them, equals the height of the statue. So those are big signs. So almost 2 of them, and almost 1.5 times Pastor Nick wide. It's a huge flippin' statue. It's pretty big. Now the statue reflected the greatness of Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel had interpreted in his dream. The statue was probably not Nebuchadnezzar himself, but was likely his god Nebo, or also known as Nabu. Now he was a god of the Babylonians, and he looked like this. So now imagine the statue, 9 feet wide, 90 feet high, covered in gold plating, being erected. It's pretty flipping big. Verse 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent word to assemble the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So Nebuchadnezzar was bringing together all his local and provincial leaders from everywhere in the kingdom to be part of this event. So satraps were leaders over regions, prefects were chiefs of the military, governors were civil administrators, counselors were what we would understand today as lawyers. Treasurers were people with this ultimate authority in settling disputes. Like a judge, but not exactly the same. Magistrates were what we would understand as judges, and officials were civil leaders. And worshiping and bowing down to this idol meant that the individual aligned himself with Nabu's representative, who was King Nebuchadnezzar. And it's interesting to note that Nebuchadnezzar didn't decree. He didn't say, you have to give up your other gods, but he asked for complete loyalty to the kingdom. And to refuse this had many implications, including treason. And we all know what happens when you decide to do something treasonous. It doesn't work out. So verses 3 to 5. Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces were assembled for the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "To you the command is given, O peoples, nations, and men of every language, that at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up." So a trigon was a form of the harp, kind of like we understand as the guitar. It played with a pick, but it only produced the high tones. And the harp was what we would understand today, that big kind of instrument with the strings that it's really nice, you play with your fingers. And the list of instruments is not exhaustive. It's meant to be kind of like an orchestra, a whole bunch of different kinds of instruments playing this music. So when the music is to be heard, the people are to fall on their faces and worship this statue. Now, I can't replicate the sound or the music of the orchestra back then, but I can give you an example of what it might sound like in the modern day. And the point is that this song is supposed to be played as a song of worship to this god, Nebo. So I'm going to play a song called Ballad of the Goddess from Skyward Sword. It's from the Legend of Zelda series, if any of you follow Legend of Zelda. And this is an orchestral arrangement, and you'll hear some of the modern day instruments involved in it. And this song is actually written to the goddess in the game. So here's what it sounds like. But that's what it would have been like hearing that music. It's beautiful. And the requirement was to just bow down and worship for a little bit this God. It was no big deal. But it was a big deal. Verses 6 to 8. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast down into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. Therefore, at that time, when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. For this reason, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. Now, this furnace that they would have been thrown to is called a kiln, and it had an open top as well as a door at the side, which allowed, when they get thrown in Nebuchadnezzar, to see inside. So I don't know if this is exactly what it looks like. I've heard about that it might be. It was a big, huge furnace that you would, if you didn't bow down, that song was playing, you were going in the furnace. And the temptation to bow down was exceedingly great. The position, favor, and life of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was on the line. And the fiery furnace was waiting if they disobeyed. So everyone had bowed down except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these Chaldeans, also called nobles, they bring them forward. Verses 9 to 15, here's a picture of what these Chaldeans would have been like. They responded and said to Nebuchadnezzar the king, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, is to fall down and worship the golden image. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a blazing fire, of a furnace of blazing fire." There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, very well. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands?" Now, it's important to note that Daniel is actually absent from this story. We don't know exactly why. It's assumed that he was on some important business. It could be he was extremely ill. So that's kind of why Daniel's not in this story right now. So Nebuchadnezzar offers this invitation to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, another chance. I'll give you a second chance to worship when the song plays. But they didn't. And Nebuchadnezzar actually stands in defiance of God, saying that by questioning that he can save the three men from the furnace. Even, he says, what God could save you from the furnace? He's challenging God, if you will. Verses 16 to 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not make their statement as a means of disrespect. But the fact of the matter is, they had no defense, and they were not going to change their mind. The choice to bow down is considerable. There was probably a temptation to compromise. The three men could bow with their knees, but not with their hearts. But it would still be disobedient to God. And the decision to stand up and be faithful was important because many people were watching what was going to happen next. Roy Swim says, "True faith is not linked to the circumstances nor to consequences. It is founded upon the immutable faithfulness of God." And faith is strong in relation to the element of faithfulness in the believer. The acknowledgement that even if God doesn't deliver the three men, they still will not bow. It's incredible. They trust and yield to God's providence, even if God doesn't save them. The act of submission is also remarkable as well. The three men had shown up to the province. They had acknowledged Nebuchadnezzar as king, but they wouldn't defy the Almighty God, who is king. They were courteous and they were respectful in their refusal. Verses 19 to 21. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Then these men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their other clothes, and were cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. So the men who bound Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are the king's mighty warriors. These guys, really jacked, really buff guys, not ones you want to mess with. And the reason why the clothes is actually described is because they were fully clothed when they were thrown in, which is really important. Verses 22 to 23, and I'm about to explain that. For this reason, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. See, every reason for these three men to burn was put in place. They were bound, they were all wearing their clothes that would catch on fire, and the furnace was heated to such a degree that it killed the men who threw them in. There was every single reason for them to die when they got thrown in. Nevertheless get thrown in when they approached it. What happened? Verses 24 to 25. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded and stood up in haste. He said to his high officials, "Was it not 3 men we cast and bound into the midst of the fire?" They replied to the king, "Oh, certainly, O king." He said, "Look, I see 4 men, loose and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the fourth is like the son of the gods." So that 4th man is God. That 4th man is Jesus. And he's walking around in the furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Verse 26 to 30. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He responded and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out, you servants of the Most High God, and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's high officials gathered around and saw in regard to these men that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men, nor was the hair of their heads singed, nor were their trousers damaged, nor had the smell of fire even come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command, and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way." Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. The interesting is the only thing that gets removed when they're thrown into the furnace is the bonds that they were bound. That's the only thing that burns up. That's the only thing that's removed. Everything else is perfect. Not even their hair. Nebuchadnezzar regards the miracle and praises the God and admires the courage and bravery of these 3 men. Just when they defied him, he then turns and admires them. And although Nebuchadnezzar saw the miracle, it's kind of sad that he didn't really remove his own gods, and there's no real account of whether he got converted or not. But the courage and faith of these men is remembered to this day, to this moment in Norwood Wesleyan Church. And it's even recorded as an act of those who quenched the fury of the flames in Hebrews 11, verse 34. So stand firm. What did we learn? We learned that standing firm is the right thing to do. We learned that we are not to compromise the gospel and the commandments and laws of God. If we want faith that endures the flames, that moves mountains, that delivers addictions, that makes perfect our weaknesses, that transforms the community of Norwood and gets rid of the sin and the drugs and everything that the devil has a hold on, then we need to stand firm in God. And we need to become passionate followers of Jesus Christ. And we have to stand firm in our faith. We can't compromise it. We must pray as Jesus taught his disciples to pray, that God would not lead us into temptation, but would deliver us from the evil one. If we want that faith that sees our own lives, the lives of Edmonton, the lives of Canada transformed in miraculous ways, we must stand firm. So our challenge this week is don't compromise your faith. Don't compromise it. There are other areas of our lives where compromise is good. But when it comes to our faith, we are not to compromise it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could have bowed down to the idol with their bodies, but to their hearts, they wouldn't have bowed, but they still would have compromised God's word. They could have just not shown up, said, no, we're not going to this event. They could have not acknowledged Nebuchadnezzar as king, but that would not have been submission to the authority that was above them. They could have bowed down and asked for forgiveness later, but they didn't, because they knew that it was wrong, and it was not what God had commanded them. So too, we must follow God's commandments in the moment, in every single moment. So don't compromise your faith. And when the temptation comes to compromise, pray as Jesus taught his disciples, saying, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. If you've never become a follower of Jesus Christ, and I know I offer this invitation every week, but that's because the time is now. I don't want anyone to miss the opportunity to become a Christian because it's too important, and the salvation of souls is just way too important to wait until another Sunday. So if you want to become a Christian, then please pray this prayer with me. Dear Jesus, I ask you to become Lord of my life. I believe that you are the Son of God who died on the cross for all my sins and for the sins of the world, and was raised again to life as it is today. I confess all my sins to you and ask your forgiveness and to make your home in my life today. I receive the gift of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.